Welcome to A Court of Transformation and Awakening. I'm Lorrie Gray.
And I'm Amanda Grace Harrison.
And in this episode, we are talking about Chapter 39 of ACOTAR.
39 is this.
So we... Major change. So we ended 38 with Rhysand using his mind control to keep the guards from tormenting Feyre Darling. And
now we find out that she also gets a fresh, hot meal every morning and evening.
yeah, where before what was she getting before? Just like stale bread, right? Like I think a lot of it was
We don't know.
moldy.
Yeah, a lot of it she couldn't even eat it.
I remember reading it. I didn't like make note of it, but yeah, but it was really bad. So she's getting a fresh hot meal.
I love this. I gobbled it down, but cursed Rhysand's name anyway.
You see her like yelling at her hand.
So,
But now she's like, all she has left to do is still ponder this riddle. Just end up with a headache because she just cannot figure this out. Poor girl. Riddles are not her strong suit. Oh my gosh, I love this. Every once in a while, I'd say a few words to the tattoo, then curse myself for a fool or curse Rhysand. But I could have sworn that as I dozed off one night, it blinked.
which I love. It's both terrifying and... But can you imagine? We don't know if it really did. Because... she was falling asleep. Anything can happen when you're falling asleep. You're like, wait, did that just blink?
Super interesting.
If it did or not, it's just terrifying and amusing at the same time. Not amusing to her.
Yeah.
Just
It's just
annoying.
weird.
And
Okay, so we just had this moment. So this character where he just did a thing that like really, really helped her. So we have this moment of like, okay, maybe he's not such a bad guy. And then we have this chapter where it's like, I don't know if like initially I could have hated him more than this right here.
oh, it's not comfortable.
Okay, so in this chapter, for those of you who maybe if you're not tracking, so Rhysand has Feyre washed, painted, dressed in clothes that barely fit.
Dressed. Really just,
They say like 2 strips of fabric that kind of barely covered
with
anything.
some gauze covering bits of her.
And forces her to go to this party with him.
Merry Midsummer.
Merry Midsummer. There's a lot. I feel like there's a bunch of passages in here that we could read. I don't know if they're all necessary.
I love that the cold breeze caressing her bare skin is enough to kindle her rage.
Oh, she's so mad.
It's gotta be so cold.
She's so mad.
They're under a mountain. It must be freezing, and she's wearing just a little strip of gauze.
Yeah. And we learned that this paint is magic and that there's a purpose. And the point is to know if anyone touches her. So the dress won't mar it, neither will your movements. And I'll remember where my hands have been. But if anyone else touches you, let's say a certain high lord who enjoys springtime, I'll know. Okay. And then again, one of those moments where I just want to burn him alive.
The one I'm thinking is.
I don't like my belongings tampered with.
Oh, my belongings. He
Okay.
owned me for a week every month. Apparently, he thought that extended to the rest of my life too.
Yeah. So not a great moment here. So we walk in. So he takes her to the party. We understand that this is a midsummer party. So Merry Midsummer. He bows, and she tries to communicate to Tamlin that this was for him. But Rhysand does what she knew he would, which is the whole point of this was to taunt Tamlin, and he shares it with him in front of everyone.
Such a foolish thing in binding myself to Rhysand.
Yeah.
She just wants to shout to Tamlin, I did it for you.
I did it for you. Okay, but again, another interesting moment here where he says, for the rest of her life, he added casually, but she notices, he said for the rest of my life, as if that was going to be a long, long while, where at this point, and I think she says it again she says it towards the end of this chapter, where she does not think that's going to be very long. And that's an interesting moment for her that he thinks that it will be longer.
Going to beat her tasks.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So there's definitely like some stuff that passes here between Rhysand and Amarantha. We know that Rhysand liked to play games. And she's like, it seemed like I was now to be a key player in whatever this one was. But all we get from Amarantha is a enjoy my party and dismisses them.
I kept my chin up. I wouldn't let the others notice that weakness, wouldn't let them know how much it killed me to be so exposed to them, to have recent symbols painted over nearly every inch of my skin, and to have Tamlin see her so debased. But she's going to keep her chin up.
Yep. Oh my
Be
goodness.
strong, Feyre.
Yep. A little fake it here, but you gotta really respect her for that, when she probably just wanted to cower. All right. And then this is an interesting scene. So she's offered wine, and she remembers this is Alice's first rule, not to drink the wine.
It's not the same wine from Solstice.
It's not. But, and so while she first refuses, he, tells her, you're going to need it. And in the end, she went ahead and drank it. I was thinking about this. I'm like, do we want to get into the alcohol discussion on the podcast? I don't know. But
we can always edit it out if we hate how it goes. Let's just go for it.
Oh, because it's one of those things where I'm like, there's to each their own. Like there's no judgment there. For what people people get to decide what they do with their lives. But I could really relate to. She just had this moment where she feels so vulnerable. She feels so terrible, and the desire to just numb.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know that she doesn't have the desire, because she's saying at this point, later in the chapter, I think she does. But here, she really, really is like, no, this is one thing I can't do it. Alice warned me. And then he says, drink one more time. And she says, my traitorous fingers latched onto the goblet. So like her body is like, let's go for it. Her body maybe knows that she needs to numb herself. She's trying to stay strong. But it definitely actually helps her.
Let's actually come back to that in a minute, because you're right. I think that it becomes a stronger desire later, because
when she realizes what she's going to be doing after she drinks, I think is when she's like, oh gosh.
Yeah, because so basically she has this drink, and then she remembers nothing, and so she wakes in her cell the next day. She's still clad in the handkerchief that he called a dress. Everything's spinning, crazy hangover.
I think
vomiting.
It would just be better if she left it not knowing what she did and just woke up the next morning, because I wouldn't want to know what I had gotten up to the night before, really.
Yeah.
It was what she got up to.
But yeah, so we have
mortifying.
So the next day after this, she's sick a lot, and then Lucian shows up, and so he notices that it's freezing, but she had been too sick to even notice. And so we have this conversation where she asks, what happened? And he's like, I don't think you want to know, but she needs to know. And we start to hear what happened the night before. Poor girl. So you danced for him most of the night, or he had you dance for him most of the night. And when you weren't dancing, you were sitting in his lap. Yeah. I don't like all this. No. This whole thing makes me so uncomfortable. And it's interesting. I'm curious, like if you've ever experienced this. And I've talked to people who have experienced this, where they drink and then they don't remember. So I used to, whenever I was in high school, there was a season whenever I had gone through, there had been a fair bit of abuse and sexual trauma, and I just had so much like deep shame. And there was a season where I would go party and drink really, really heavily. And I would drink until I threw up. Like go party, hang out, drink until you vomit on the lawn. Like it was a really wonderful time in my history, for sure. But I never blacked out. When people talk about this idea of like not remembering stuff, now some of it was fuzzy, but I never had that experience of genuinely not remembering anything that I'm aware of.
I have one.
One?
I hate it so much because my kids didn't black out. I was just like, I literally the next day was calling people. I'm like, I'm so sorry that I didn't say goodnight to you at the party. I'm like, yeah, you did. You walked us out to the car. And I'm like, you're kidding me. It was so creepy when people started telling me the stuff that I had done. And I was a weird person. I had done, I literally hid under a table and like was It's
Oh,
I can laugh
friend.
now.
You can
but
laugh
there
now.
it's years ago at this point, but
But you can relate
and
to
I
this.
was terrified too, where I was just like, oh my gosh.
It's scary, right?
I never want to drink. I still did drink for quite a few years after that, but
Yeah.
that's terrifying. That thought of not knowing, of being like, I don't mind if I black out and just fall asleep.
That's
Great.
different. Yeah, fall asleep, like
To
pass
still
out.
be awake and like then you're
Yeah.
like, who was in control of my body? Because it wasn't me.
me.
That's so terrifying.
Yeah.
To know that I did all that weird stuff.
Man,
It
yeah,
was
see,
like throwing pieces of bread around the hall. I forget. The kids will tell me weird things. And I'm like, okay, can we just never talk about that night again, please?
right? But I mean, and that's, I mean, I love that you can relate to that feeling because that's what she's experiencing, right? That waking up of, and to understand that you did a bunch of stuff that you didn't know. So I never experienced that with alcohol, but there was a period of time whenever my health was really bad and I couldn't sleep. Like I just, and looking back now, I'm like, my nervous system was just such a wreck. And so they gave me Ambien or something. It was one of those like sleep medications. And it took me a while to figure it out, but as soon as it kicked in, it gave me amnesia.
Oh.
So from the time the medicine kicked in until I fell asleep, I lost those memories, but I was awake and talking and doing things. And I actually noticed it because I was just as obsessed with reading then as I am now. And so pretty much every night I would.
You have to reread all those chapters.
Yes, that is exactly what happened. So I would be reading,
Oh my god.
you know, so I'd go to bed and like I would take it and then I would go to bed and read until I got tired and I would fall asleep. And so I'm like reading and then I would mark it and sleep and I would wake up and the next day whenever I went to read, I'm like, why is my marker in the wrong place? Like I didn't read all this. And I would go back to what I remembered. And it took it happening multiple nights in a row. And then also a few weird things of like my husband talking about something. I'm like, he's like, we talked about this. You agreed to this. I'm like, no, I didn't. And pulling it together and realizing that it's like, no, like last night before bed. And I'm like, oh my word. And we started playing around with it. Yep. And from the time that it kicked in until I went to sleep, I had no memory. Yeah,
Oh, it's so scary.
I did not like that, which I actually had an acquaintance who was same thing. So she was taking a medication like that when she was pregnant.
Oh.
So she took it before bed, went to sleep, went into labor in the middle of the night, and
Oh no.
doesn't remember the birth.
Oh wow.
Like literally like went to sleep, woke up, had this whole thing happen, and then like woke up to having a baby and doesn't remember.
Wow. Did her birth go well?
I don't remember.
Because that could be
It was
a
like-
blessing or a curse.
I know,
depending
right?
on- like if it went badly, then that might be really great.
It's one of those stories that I heard like through the grapevine. So some of the details can be wrong.
Really terrifying though. Like just
To not have memory of things. Yeah. Yeah, alcohol's so weird. I love, again, this is probably, what is it, the third time I've referenced Stranger Things because we're like rewatching it. But have you, I don't know how much you've seen. You said you watched season 1?
not even all of
Not
season
even
one.
one.
We got
So
through
you didn't
a few
get to
episodes before
So you
I
didn't get to
realized.
meet Murray. So we meet this. Oh, for those of you who watch, we love the character Murray. He's kind of a side character that we meet, and he's eccentric to say the very least. Like just one of those people who like lives in a bunker and like has security cameras and is paranoid about everything and is just really weird.
Like a lot of people I know could become a Murray really easily.
Oh, he's so funny. I mean, his character, like he's got kind of like the like bald on top and then longer in the back, like mullet sort of
sounds
thing.
hot.
Like he is. And I mean, he provides so much comic relief, but like he drinks a lot of vodka and they're going to him, to this character, for help, and they're like, why are you drinking right now? He's like, it's a central nervous system depressant, helps me think, and like takes a shot. Oh, but it is though, like alcohol is that.
I have a confession. So when we were living with my grandmother-in-law a few years ago, we lived with her for a few years, and it was very stressful because she was not a pleasant person to be around. And she was 97 and very, very Armenian, which means that she, as an elder in the Armenian community, she just really believes that, she should be basically queen of the universe and we should do everything that she wanted, which I had just a few issues and I have a few boundaries and I was working on boundaries back then. So anyways, she and I tussled on the regular. So if Ian was, she loved, loved, loved the father of my children, which was her youngest grandchild. And if he was not home that morning to be a buffer between us, I would literally drink either 3 shots of vodka or this is on an empty stomach. Like we're talking 8 o'clock in the morning. I would either have 6 shots of sake or 3 shots of vodka before I would walk into the kitchen in the morning. And when
Wow.
I would do that, she and I would get along so well. And I would literally like get down on my knees next to her and say, thank you so much, Grandma, for letting us live here. I'm so sorry for all the times that I'm not more appreciative, because she really needed to hear thank you 1,000 times a day. But anyways, long
Wow.
story short, alcohol, I definitely used it. Not proud of it, but it was that central nervous system damper thing that helped me say, well, okay, what is the one outcome? What's the one thing I can do in this moment that's going to make everything better? Oh, kiss Grandma's ass. I could not kiss Grandma's ass when I was sober because I had so many things in the way of like, oh, but she just said this and she just did this to my kid and she just did this. But if I had the alcohol, I could just be like, just kiss her ass, Amanda. Everything's
That's
going to go better.
wild.
And it worked.
As in, I like totally different scenario, but there was a period of time where I definitely used alcohol in sort of a self-medicating way. And it was when my chronic health issues were the worst. I've been in chronic pain, and like everything just made me so anxious, like anxiety to the point of being non-functional. And then, oh my gosh, this is kind of, I feel like this is a story that may make people think negatively about my parents, but they've always medicated with alcohol. They're from the Midwest. This is what many people do. And they came to visit and they were like, you know what you need? You need some alcohol. And they went to the liquor store and brought alcohol. I'm like bedbound on my couch and they're like, here, drink this. And at first I'm like, this is a bad call, but it did help me chill. And like everything was so tense all the time and I actually relaxed. And then there was a season there when, yeah, if it was like I needed to be in the car or like leave the house, like I was so anxious about everything, seeing people. And yeah, I started preemptively drinking so that I would relax. Now, thank goodness I'm one of those people that I do self-correct pretty quickly. Like it was one of those moments where I'm like, I see where this could go. I'm like,
Probably gonna have to nip this in the bud early.
I'm gonna have to nip this in the bud early. Yeah. And I did. There's been a few moments like that. Pain medication during that time was the same thing where they were like, well, here, just like take these if you need them. And they were really strong things. And I would, and I took them one day after a procedure I had to have done. And I was like, shoot, I absolutely understand why people become addicted to this for sure. And I'm like, they were like willing to like give me tons of these. I'm like, if I had taken one every single day, I would have felt so much better and I would have become addicted. So it was one of those things where like I only let myself take one on the days that I had my most painful treatments. So take one on a treatment day, or if it was like a special occasion, like a birthday or a thing where I really needed to be able to show up for my family. But I had to draw really firm boundaries. But it's one of those things where now, thankfully, I did not become addicted to either of those things. Like both times I did self-correct and I did pull out of that. And I'm really proud of myself for that. But also for both of them, I came away with it with so much compassion for people who do become addicted to either. And I think it's that. So again, I've mentioned before, Gabor Mate, I like him, but he talks about the different layers of compassion. And one of them being, what's he call it? Like the compassion of sameness. I'll have to look up the exact thing. But it's the opposite of that us them. Like when you look at somebody, because he works a lot with people who struggle with addiction, he's like, and whenever I can look at this person who's struggling with addiction and really recognize that we are the same,
Yeah.
even if what they're doing is really destructive, he's like, but I can recognize the part in me that has wanted to fill that hole, that's wanted to fill that void, that's wanted to numb. He's like, no, and mine didn't lead to that. He's like, but is it motivated by the same thing? Do I have that part in me that's the same as the part in them? Yes.
Yeah.
And going through those things, I'm like, I mean, obviously I still don't think, like self-medicating with alcohol or being addicted to prescription drugs, I'm not supportive of either of those. I don't think they're a good thing. But I had moments where I'm like, I get it. Like I totally get why people end up down that path and how easy, like it would have been so easy to go down either one of those paths. Thankful I'm not there, but but again, but that compassion. Oh, alcohol.
Oh,
But it's not, but it's not just that. It's and I think for, again, so if we're wanting to take this work deeper for our own lives, it's interesting that there are certain forms of escape and numbing and buffering that are more socially acceptable. I actually just saw a video by do you follow stuff from like Dr. Daniel Amen?
I know. Yes, I read his book.
Yeah. So the Change Your Brain, Change Your Life, I really appreciate it. Like, I don't know, like he's not my favorite person, but I follow some of his stuff. But it was interesting. He just posted a random Instagram reel the other day or video that was saying alcohol is the only drug that you have to explain why you don't use it.
Alcohol's the only drug you have to explain why you don't use it?
Right. Because like any other thing, if you told me you don't use heroin,
right.
you don't use heroin
okay.
or cocaine, I'm like, totally understand why you don't use heroin or cocaine. But if somebody's like, I don't drink alcohol, people are like, okay, well, explain that to me. Justify that to me. Like, why don't you drink alcohol? There's almost like an expectation that you do. And then if you don't, you're sometimes pushed to justify it.
It's true. And people don't ask you why you don't smoke.
Right.
You don't smoke, why don't you smoke?
Right.
So you're right.
But alcohol, it's different, and the way that in particular is perceived within our society, where yeah, people do. But I think that there's a similarity too if we understand that eating and food a lot of times does do the same thing in terms of emotional buffering and emotional management. Now that's another one. If you decide I'm not eating sugar, you're going to get even more questions than I'm not drinking alcohol, and that's not one of those things that just goes over well in a crowd of people.
Yeah.
But it does. So one, I always think it's fascinating, the idea of like, there's a similarity across a lot of these things. I mean, I think over drinking, overworking, pornography, over Instagramming, like I think they're all similar in the sense that they're a form of emotional buffering and a way of managing emotions that we're not willing to face. But how some of them are so accepted and some are not, I think is really fascinating. And like almost expected. Like you had a hard day and you drink alcohol. It's just like I mean, how many times do you see that in movies, right? Oh my gosh, it's a hard day and they go and they take a drink.
Yeah.
Like like you see it over and over again so much. It's like so much in our psyche that that's just an acceptable, normal way of managing emotions.
Yeah. And that it's like not that healthy, not the best, but everybody does it.
Everybody does it. Yeah. Yeah. And so that's not one that I don't do that these days. Like these days, I don't manage my emotions with alcohol. I don't manage my emotions with food. But then I do have to get real with myself of like, what do I do? Like when there's something that I don't want to feel, what does that look like for me? What is my form of buffering? What is my form of escape? What is my form of self-numbing? Yeah, mine, I think at this point, mine mostly is overworking for sure. Like I'll just get like wrapped up in a project and I'll just go to like the point that I'm so stressed that I don't have time to think about whatever the thing is. But that's one of those ones that is almost like praised in our society, like overworking. They're like, oh my gosh, you're getting so much done. I'm like, yeah, does anybody want to know why?
If you suddenly picked up drinking, people are like, Lorrie, why are you drinking all of a sudden? You haven't had alcohol in years. But we're not like, Lorrie, why are you doing 36 projects this week?
Right? It's like, because I don't want to feel X, Y, and Z. Like, but that was my whole life. Like that's one of the, when we look at like self-sabotaging patterns, I work with a lot of people who identify as hyperachievers or overachievers. And it's the hardest one to recognize as self-sabotage.
Yeah.
Like, okay, people pleasing or playing the victim or, these sorts of things. Like everybody or most people really recognize those as negative. But whenever hyperachieving is identified as a self-sabotaging pattern, most people really struggle to even see it as a form of self-sabotage or a form of self-protection or a thing that's negative because they've received praise their whole life. And it's like, but it worked, but that's how I did this. That's how I, managed to be top of my class and do this and do this and do this. And that was my story, that I achieved so much and it was always praised. Yeah, but I'm like, nobody asked me why I was doing it.
Yeah.
Nobody asked me why I worked 6 jobs, the summer before college. Nobody asked.
Literally worked 6 jobs.
I think 6.
Oh my gosh.
So let me see, what all did I do? So I worked at a restaurant. So I would go in. Okay, so my day was I would go in. I think I had to get there at like 4:35 because we were doing like my boss wanted to do like fresh donuts at the time, so I would have to like go in and
Time to make the donuts.
Yep, I literally was the time to make the donuts and get them in so they were ready for like the 7 a.m. coffee people. And then I would leave and go to the pool because I was I coached the swim team. I was way too young to be doing that, but they needed somebody. So I coached the swim team. So I'd have to get early to get my workout in and then coach the swim team. And then I would go back for the lunch prep at the restaurant. And then I went back to the pool to lifeguard. And then after lifeguarding, I did swim lessons. And then after swim lessons, I went back for the evening rush.
Gosh.
And then sometimes in the evenings, we had another workout, like an evening swim practice. And then I went and cleaned after hours at the restaurant, went home and slept a few hours, and then got up.
And this was to raise money for college? Because I would imagine someone like you would be a full ride scholarship kind of girl.
Well, I did have a full ride for that, but you still have to pay for housing and meal and food and all of that.
And none of my school. I must have picked a really great school because I literally had to pay for nothing until senior year when I wanted to do my semesters abroad.
I didn't have to pay for a lot, but I think part of it too was like people had asked me, like, I never applied for any of those jobs. People were like, will you do this? Will you do this? Will you do this? Will you do this? And I just said, yeah.
There you go.
Sure. That sounds like a good idea. Yeah. So, I did all this stuff. I was valedictorian. I was captain of all the sports teams, like all those things. And, that's great. And it looked really good. But the whole point was, I'm like, I didn't believe that I deserved to take up space and exist. And so the whole point was, can I do enough to try to get rid of this like shame inside of me? Like I just felt so much shame and emptiness and not enoughness. I'm like, if I do enough, if I achieve enough, can I make that go away? Can I fill that hole? Yeah. And then also drinking on the weekends and in the midst of all of that.
You did it all.
Oh my gosh. That season of my life.
All the things.
Oh my word. Like thinking back, just like remembering that season, I'm like,
you're going to need a nap at the end of this podcast.
Oh, I may have also been simultaneously dating 6 people.
6 jobs, 6 boyfriends.
You just keep them in different towns. It's fine. It's fine. They're just in different towns. Nobody meets. Gosh.
Now I really need that time machine. I'm going to go back and hang out with the Lorrie of that season and see if I can recognize you at all.
College actually got better, but the end of high school was really rough for me. But anyway, so all that to say, like the things that we do, some of them look good from the outside, but that's like, even with my clients, stuff like, I have interesting conversations where, especially if they're like a people pleaser, like if I know that that's a thing, where I will give them a homework assignment and they come back in and they're like, I did it, yay. I'm like, okay, but why? Like, right? Like I don't automatically assume, because like in their mind, I did the thing and I want to know, okay, why did you do it and how did you do it? Because I'm like, you doing this thing because you're trying to make me happy doesn't serve you. Did you treat yourself awfully the whole week to get it done? Because I'm like, I would rather you not do the thing because it was for you and it was a kindness to yourself than to get it done, like no matter what the cost is. But yeah, when people come in and they're like, I did my homework or I didn't do my homework, like I don't assume either one of those are good, bad, right, wrong, because I need to know why before we can even get there. And like doing homework isn't automatically better than not doing homework. It takes a long, like I get looks, people are like, huh? Just a lot of like, what are we talking about? I'm like, no, let's let's actually break down.
I did it to impress you
Yes.
and make you happy because you're my coach. And if you like me, then I feel better.
Yeah, and make sure you're not mad at me.
Yeah, I don't want extra credit.
Oh my
I want to
gosh.
know that I'm a good client.
I love those conversations though, when people like really see it.
Yeah.
Sometimes they have moments where they're like, I don't get it. Like just like the hyperachieving thing. They're like, I don't get why that's bad. I'm like, okay, let's talk about it. But
It does take a lot to unpack why that's bad. That's definitely more difficult to see than that your heroin or alcohol habit is a bad thing. You don't have to convince those people.
Okay, that was a super long tangent, but I think the question for our people is what's your thing? What's your escape? What's your numb? What's your buffer? And is it one that's obvious that societally is considered a bad thing or a shaming thing? And I even do the opposite. So with people pleasing, people are like, oh my gosh, I'm a people pleaser and it's so bad. And some of the work there is I'm like, okay, it's self-protection. You started doing that for a reason. You probably had to do that as a kid to keep yourself safe. So can we stop judging that one? Or ones where it's still numbing and self-protection, but it's so accepted that it's hard to see it as bad. I'm like, I feel like there's this whole group that people struggle to even see as bad, and then this whole group that people struggle to be compassionate with themselves about. But that conversation with yourself of what yours in particular is, I think would be really good work for everybody to have a moment with themselves about.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. What in the world were we even talking about? Oh, okay. Oh, right. Yeah. So we're back in the cell.
nightly.
We're back in the cell talking with Lucian, where she's getting this. She's learning everything that happened and everything that she missed out on.
Kind of dancing.
Oh, okay. But here, so then we have this conversation where he's like, what were you thinking? Didn't you know I would come as soon as I could? And she's like, I was dying. First of all, I had this fever. I was barely able to keep conscious. How was I supposed to know you'd come, that you even understood how quickly humans can die of that sort of thing? You told me you hesitated that time with the Naga. And he's like, I swore an oath to Tamlin.
Then I marked when she says, I had no other choice. Because I'm always like, did you? There's always another choice. But then I play back that moment in her life. I mean, Lucian didn't come in after Rhysand left, so we can assume it really was death, or like a gross. I can't even imagine dying of like infection and that would just be awful.
And it turns out now he was going to come, but like, how was she supposed to know that? Like,
And when was it? Because he didn't.
When?
We don't know when he was.
Yeah.
Like, I was going to come, but I mean, who knows how soon she was going to die after that? So.
yeah. And his reasoning here, he's like, he's like, one. So she's like, I'm not going to trust you after all of that stuff. He's like, okay, but you saw me risk my neck for you during the task. Wasn't that enough to kind of like prove this? He's like, and you offered up your name for me. After all that I said to you, all that I did, you still offered up your name. Didn't you realize I would help you after that, oath or no oath? And I love this internal dialogue where what she says out loud to him was, I had no other choice. But what she says internally to herself was, I hadn't realized it would mean anything to him at all.
Well, because she wasn't doing it for him either. She wasn't people pleasing him. She just genuinely cared for him and wanted to protect him in that moment.
Yeah. But I think it's one of those things where like somebody does, and maybe that's it. That is one way to look at it. I think you could be right on that. I think the way that I read it was, again, this way that we put ourselves in a different category where somebody does the smallest thing for her and she's like, oh my gosh, I owe them so much.
Yeah.
But she does something huge for somebody else. She's like, well, I just didn't even realize that you would care. Right. And that difference of, I don't think the fact that she never really thought that it would matter, like her brain never went down that path, to be able to notice what a huge risk he took, like her not seeing the shift. And I'm not saying she should have, but it's interesting from the outside realizing that she hadn't even considered it. And I feel like that ties into her belief about herself and her comparison with these high fae and how she views them. That is not always super accurate.
Yeah.
But okay, so here was this other thing too that like you said, this more conversation of, she's like, it's over. Basically, it's over. It's done with. Yes, I know who he is. She's like, I know that you swore an oath to protect me, but you don't need to feel like you do that. You don't need to feel like you owe me anything for saving you. I would have done it just to wipe the smirk off your brothers' faces. Again, I love that moment.
Yeah.
Where she's like, forgetting about you, forgetting about me. Like she's just so, she dislikes them as much as we dislike them.
Yes.
She's like, and to see that she's got that little, that side of her that would have done it just for that. Okay, so also have this hint of she's saying, okay, he gets a week of my life every month. And he's like, yes, well, we'll see about that when the time comes. Okay, so that's interesting. I'm like, oh, like I think as readers and her, she just assumes it's permanent. And like as a high fae, he's like, yeah, there may be a workaround.
Yeah.
Okay, okay, so that's kind of good. All right. So, oh, and then we learn why he didn't come sooner. That she punished him and kept his back from healing. Ooh, ooh, this is a rough thing. Okay, now this was the other one that stood out to me here was that she's like, okay, is Tamlin all right? The spell that Amarantha has him under to make him so silent. And this is where we learn that there isn't a spell that he's doing this to avoid letting Amarantha know what affects him the most. I think that's helpful for her because she's been very confused by his lack of reaction to her. So she now has an understanding that him not showing any love for her is loving. A little backwards, but makes sense. Okay.
Complicated times.
Okay. So now another one where next night, again washed, painted, brought to the throne room, just evening entertainment, and drank mercifully unaware, and night after night dressed in the same way. And so we get into this pattern of this was not just a one night thing, this is ongoing. It doesn't tell us exactly how long, just that it was night after night we experience the same thing. Each day she awakes ill, but since she doesn't have tasks during the day, she is now just doing this nightly routine in the throne room and then sleeping off the nausea the next day.
There we go.
What a routine.
What a life under the mountain.
What a life. Okay. All right, so then we get a sense of how much time has passed. Your second trial is tomorrow night. So,
And even though he earlier was like, made it sound like he believed she was going to just go right through everything and survive the whole thing. Now he says this could be your last.
yeah, but so this conversation, this is another one of those ones where this is a little bit less about Feyre and more about just some of the things that we're just getting this. I feel like it's kind of like back when she was at the manor and we didn't understand the curse, where like she kept having these conversations where it was creating more questions than answers, where it's not really giving information, it's just showing that there's a bunch of stuff that she doesn't know. Before it was trying to figure out what this whole curse was. Now it's like, what is happening with these games and with this character? But so she has this conversation where we understand, like she's trying to figure out like what is the point here? Like, what do you want with me beyond taunting Tamlin? Now, one, he says taunting him is my greatest pleasure. Then she makes a joke, he makes this joke about just enjoying the presence of a female. But she's like, you saved my life. He's like, and through your life, I saved Tamlin's. Okay, why? He's like, that, Feyre, is the real question, isn't it? And he doesn't answer it, but it starts us thinking about this question. Yeah. Dun, dun, dun. More of the story.
Is he saving Tamlin?
Okay, now another scene here that tells us, this is again one of those ones where it's just, we're just understanding there's more going on here, where we have this scene with the High Lord of Summer is caught trying to escape, and Amarantha wants Rhysand to tell her why.
Yeah.
And this is one where she's not sure how many other people see this, but that he says that he was acting alone. He's just a coward, and then kills him on the spot, which she's not happy with because that's not what exactly she wanted to happen.
She wanted a slow, torturous death.
Yeah, but he's just like, apologies, shrugs, walks away. And, it's interesting to see the crowd and the way that some are calling him a whore and some are saying smiles. But the biggest thing being that she recognizes there was more going on. Like she's like she understood that the killing was a mercy.
Yeah.
She wasn't sure if other people did, but she understands this, and again just adds, I think, not an answer but more of a question to,
she's like, maybe that had been another calculated move too. So
Just a lot of questions. Okay, so gosh.
That she doesn't know. That's for sure.
So 39 ends her time between her first and second task. Gosh, a lot happened during that month. That was not a good month.
No.
That was not a good month for
Not at
Feyre.
that point.
We've had some chapters that were like, these are really fun. I'm like, these last few chapters, not my favorite. And in our next one, not a whole lot better, because come back for chapter 40 where she gets to do her second task. And even if you haven't read it yet, you know it's not going to be good.
No.
So, but hey, here's what I'll say, even if the subject matter that we're talking about is kind of down, we love being here with you guys. We love doing this podcast. We love hanging out, talking about all the things.
We do.
Thanks for joining us as we talk about throwing up in front yards and whatever else we talk about.
Good times.
It's good times.
Good times. Thank you for watching this episode, guys. And if you haven't already, please head over to our community at ACOTAR, ACOTAA.circle.so, where you can jump in deeper and get a little more involved in this adventure with us. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.